The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floor with walls that seemed to reach into infinity. Commander Jake Morrison sat quietly in the human delegation section, watching alien representatives from 47 different worlds discuss Earth's application for membership. The humans were the newest species to request entry into this ancient organization that had governed interstellar relations for over 10,000 years. Jake wore his standard Earth Defense Corps uniform, which looked plain compared to the elaborate ceremonial garments of the other delegates. To his left sat Lieutenant Pete Sullivan, who served as their diplomatic advisor, and to his right, Captain Ben Davis, who commanded Earth's small fleet of exploration vessels. The 3 humans appeared tiny in their assigned seating area, which had been designed for much larger beings. High Commander Vextar, a Zephyrian Empire, rose from his crystalline throne-like chair. The 7-foot-tall warrior's exoskeleton gleamed with a blue metallic sheen, and his forearms moved with practiced military precision. His voice echoed through the chamber when he spoke with obvious disdain about humanity's request. Honored members of the Council, we gather today to consider the application of a species that has barely left their home star system, Vextar declared while gesturing toward the human delegation. These creatures call themselves humans, and they claim to deserve a place among civilizations that have conquered galaxies and bent the laws of physics to their will. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled delegates. The Altarians, with their massive brain cases, nodded their approval, while the insectoid representatives from the Mantis cluster clicked their mandibles in what Jake had learned was their equivalent of laughter. Even the more moderate species seemed skeptical about Earth's chances. Kate leaned closer to Jake and whispered, "The preliminary reports show that most Council members view us as primitives who got lucky with faster-than-light travel." Jake nodded, but kept his expression neutral. Earth had indeed discovered FTL technology only 50 years ago, when a mining expedition on Mars uncovered ancient ruins containing star maps and basic propulsion designs. The technology was crude compared to what these advanced civilizations possessed, but it had allowed humanity to make contact with the greater galactic community. The ethereal Prime, who served as the Council's chairman, floated above the central platform in a shimmering energy field. This ancient being was older than recorded history and had witnessed the rise and fall of countless species. When the Prime spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The question before us is not whether humanity possesses advanced technology," the Prime intoned. "Many species have achieved great technological heights yet failed to demonstrate the qualities necessary for Council membership. The true measure of a civilization lies in how they respond to challenges and whether they can contribute meaningfully to our collective security." Captain Davis shifted in his seat. He had read the Council's admission requirements, which included a military capability assessment. Most applicant species were required to demonstrate their defensive abilities before being accepted as members. This usually involves simulated combat scenarios designed by the Council's military strategists. High Commander Vextar stepped forward again, his crystalline armor reflecting the chamber's ambient lighting. "If these humans believe they deserve membership, then let them prove their worth through the standard trial. We have seen dozens of species attempt this test, and most fail within the first phase. Those who survive often require their most advanced warships and largest fleets to complete the challenge." The trial Vextar referenced was well known throughout the galaxy. It consisted of defending a space station against increasingly difficult waves of automated attack drones. The scenario was designed to test tactical thinking, resource management, and combat effectiveness under pressure. Species that passed the trial were considered capable of contributing to the Council's collective defense against external threats. Jake stood up, slowly drawing attention from the massive assembly. His movement seemed almost insignificant compared to the grand gestures of the alien delegates. but something in his bearing commanded respect. The Earth delegation accepts the trial, he announced in a clear voice that carried across the vast chamber. Surprised whispers filled the hall. Most species requested time to prepare or attempted to negotiate modified terms for the trial. Few accepted the challenge immediately, and none had ever done so with such calm confidence. The ethereal prime's energy field pulsed with what might have been curiosity. Commander Morrison, you understand the nature of this trial. The automated defense systems you will face have been designed by our greatest military minds. They incorporate tactical algorithms from 47 different warfare traditions and adapt to counter conventional strategies. Many species bring their most powerful dreadnoughts and still suffer devastating losses. Jake nodded respectfully. We understand the requirements, Honored Prime. Humanity requests permission to attempt the trial using a single vessel with a crew of 5. The chamber erupted in a mixture of laughter clicks and various alien expressions of disbelief. Even species that were sympathetic to humanity seemed shocked by this request. The trial was typically attempted with fleets of ships and crews, numbering in the thousands. Vextar's forearms spread wide in a gesture of mock amazement. A single ship and 5 crew members. This is either the greatest display of courage I have witnessed or the most foolish act of suicide in galactic history. The Prime raised what appeared to be a hand for silence. Commander Morrison, are you certain your species wishes to proceed with these limitations? The trial can be attempted only once per species, and failure results in immediate rejection of membership. Kate touched Jake's arm gently, but he had already made his decision. Earth's leadership had discussed this possibility during their preparation for the council meeting. They had studied the trial records and noticed something that other species seemed to miss. Every previous attempt had relied on overwhelming firepower or advanced defensive systems. No one had tried using unconventional tactics or smaller, more maneuverable vessels. We are certain, Jake replied. Humanity believes that the size of a force matters less than how that force is used. The ancient being that served as chairman seemed to consider this response for a long moment. Finally, the Prime's energy field brightened, and its voice took on a more formal tone. Very well. The trial will commence in 72 standard hours. You will be provided with detailed specifications for the space station you must defend, and the nature of the threats you will face. The simulation will take place in the Kepler testing ground, where our monitoring systems can record every aspect of your performance. As the formal session concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Jake noticed the various expressions directed toward the human delegation. Some aliens showed pity, others displayed curiosity, but most seemed convinced they were about to witness a spectacular failure. The Zephyrian delegation in particular appeared eager to see humanity humiliated. Ben leaned over to Jake as they gathered their materials. You realize that every military expert in the galaxy thinks we're insane. Jake smiled slightly. That's exactly what I'm counting on, Captain. Sometimes the best advantage is being underestimated. Kate reviewed her datapad containing preliminary intelligence about the trial. The last species to attempt this was the Rigelian Federation. They brought 12 heavy cruisers and still lost over half their fleet before completing the challenge. The species before them brought 30 ships and failed entirely. Jake studied the information, but his mind was already working on possibilities that conventional military thinking might overlook. Earth's history was filled with examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones through superior tactics, mobility, and creative thinking. David had defeated Goliath not through superior strength, but by changing the rules of engagement. The 3 humans made their way through the council complex toward their temporary quarters. Tomorrow, they would begin detailed preparations for a trial that would determine not only Earth's membership in the galactic community, but potentially the entire future of human civilization among the stars. Jake felt the weight of that responsibility, but also a growing excitement about the opportunity to show the galaxy what human ingenuity could accomplish when conventional wisdom said victory was impossible. The betting pools started within hours of the council session ending. Throughout the galactic diplomatic quarter, aliens gathered in groups placing wagers on how quickly the human trial would end in failure. The Altarians, with their legendary analytical abilities, ran complex probability calculations and declared that humanity had a 0.03% chance of surviving the first wave of attack drones. Ambassador Kethvar of the Centauri hegemony stood in the main diplomatic lounge surrounded by military attaches from a dozen different species. His scaled hide bore the ritual scars of a veteran warrior, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in actual combat. "My war masters estimate 12 minutes maximum survival time," he announced while sipping a luminescent beverage. "These humans show courage, but courage without capability is merely elaborate suicide." Even the species that had expressed sympathy for Earth's application seemed doubtful about the trial outcome. The Andromedans, who were known for their peaceful nature and philosophical wisdom, had offered quiet support for human membership, but their representative shook her ethereal head when asked about the upcoming test. "Wisdom sometimes requires accepting limitations," she said softly. "Perhaps humanity will learn valuable lessons from this experience even in defeat." Jake Morrison spent the first day after the council session reviewing every piece of available data about previous trial attempts. The council archives contained detailed records of 43 different species who had attempted the military capability assessment over the past 2 centuries. 37 had failed completely, while 6 had passed, but with significant losses. That took decades to recover from. The testing ground itself was located in an empty star system designated Kepler 442, where the council maintained a permanent monitoring station. The space station that participants were required to defend measured 2 kilometers in length and contained multiple docking bays, maintenance facilities, and command centers. It was essentially a miniature city in space that represented the type a strategic asset that council members were expected to protect. Kate Sullivan coordinated with Earth Command to arrange for the USS Defiance to be transported to the testing site. The ship represented Earth's most advanced military vessel, though. By galactic standards, it was barely more sophisticated than an armed shuttle. The Defiance measured only 200 meters in length and carried a crew of 40 during normal operations. But Jake planned to attempt the trial with just 5 people. The selection of crew members had been carefully considered during the flight to the council homeworld. Jake needed specialists who could adapt quickly to unexpected situations and work together under extreme pressure. Military doctrine from other species emphasized overwhelming firepower and advanced defensive systems, but Jake suspected that flexibility and creativity would be more valuable assets. Amy Chun had been chosen as pilot because of her exceptional spatial awareness and unconventional flying techniques. She had grown up racing atmospheric craft through Earth's asteroid mining fields, where pilots learned to navigate dense debris clouds at high speeds. Her personnel file contained numerous commendations for innovative maneuvering during exploration. Missions where standard procedures had proven inadequate. Rick Thompson would serve as engineer despite being the youngest member of the team at 26 years old. His specialty was improvised solutions using limited resources, and he had earned recognition for keeping ships operational under conditions that should have resulted in complete system failures. Rick understood technology at an intuitive level that allowed him to make modifications and repairs that more experienced engineers might consider impossible. Lisa Martinez brought weapons expertise along with a background in tactical analysis that emphasized precision over raw firepower. She had studied historical Earth conflicts where smaller forces had defeated larger ones through superior positioning and timing. Her approach to combat focused on identifying enemy weaknesses rather than attempting to match their strengths. Sam Rodriguez would handle tactical coordination and communications. His ability to process multiple information streams simultaneously made him ideal for managing complex battlefield situations. Sam had trained with Earth's Special Forces, where he learned to think several moves ahead of his opponents and identify opportunities that others might miss. Captain Ben Davis observed the crew selection process with growing concern about the odds they faced. Jake, I understand the reasoning behind choosing our best people, but 5 crew members against military systems designed by 47 different civilizations seems like an impossible challenge. Jake reviewed technical specifications for the attack drones they would face while considering Ben's concerns. The automated opponents were indeed formidable, with each wave designed to be more difficult than the last. The first wave consisted of basic fighter-type drones that relied on speed and numbers. The second wave introduced larger units with heavier weapons and better armor. Subsequent waves added electronic warfare capabilities, adaptive tactics, and finally, a command unit that incorporated artificial intelligence systems from the galaxy's most advanced species. The problem with most military thinking is that it assumes your opponent will fight the same way you do, Jake explained while highlighting sections of the tactical data. Every species that attempted this trial used conventional fleet formations and standard engagement protocols. They tried to match firepower with firepower and technology with technology. Kate studied the records of previous attempts, looking for patterns that might reveal weaknesses in the trial design. The Zephyrians brought their most advanced battle cruiser and still suffered 60% casualties before completing the challenge. The Regellian Federation lost half their fleet, and they had numerical superiority throughout most of the engagement. The galactic military observers who would monitor the trial had already begun arriving at the testing site. Representatives from major powers wanted to witness what they expected to be a quick demonstration of human inadequacy. The observer ships took positions at safe distances where their sensors could record every detail of the upcoming engagement. Hi. Commander Vextar commanded the Zephyrian observer vessel and made no attempt to hide his anticipation of human failure. He had served in the military for over 2 centuries and considered himself an expert on combat effectiveness. His analysis of the USS Defiance had concluded that the human ship possessed roughly 10% of the combat capability shown by the weakest vessel to ever attempt the trial. The Defiance itself drew considerable attention from galactic military experts who studied its design with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. The ship relied on kinetic weapons that fired solid projectiles rather than energy beams or exotic matter disruptors. Its armor consisted of layered metal alloys instead of adaptive energy shields or quantum barrier systems. The computer systems used basic artificial intelligence rather than the quantum consciousness networks employed by advanced civilizations. Amy Chun spent hours familiarizing herself with the space station's layout and structure. Unlike most console species who relied on automated systems for maneuvering, she preferred to understand every detail of the environment where she would be operating. The station's design included multiple levels, docking arms, communication arrays, and defensive positions that could potentially be used in ways their designers never intended. Rick Thompson analyzed the technical specifications of the attack drones, looking for potential vulnerabilities that conventional tactics might not exploit. Each drone type had been optimized for specific combat roles, but optimization often meant accepting limitations in other areas. The faster units sacrificed armor for speed, while the heavily armed variants were less maneuverable. Lisa Martinez studied the weapons systems available on both the station and the Defiance, calculating optimal firing solutions and ammunition conservation strategies. The trial was designed to test resource management as well as tactical thinking, since participants could not resupply during the engagement. Every shot had to count, and traditional approaches that relied on overwhelming firepower would quickly exhaust available ammunition. Sam Rodriguez coordinated with the Council's monitoring systems to ensure that communication protocols would function properly during the trial. He also reviewed the rules of engagement, which were surprisingly flexible. In terms of tactics and strategy, the only requirement was defending the space station from destruction, while eliminating all attacking forces. As the 72-hour preparation period neared its end, betting odds throughout the galactic community had shifted even further against humanity. A final consensus among military experts was that the human attempt would serve as an educational example of why technological advancement and military capability were essential prerequisites for Council membership. Jake gathered his crew for a final briefing as they prepared to board the Defiance in transit to the testing site. The 4 specialists he had chosen represented the best of human adaptability and creative thinking, but they would be facing odds that had defeated civilizations with thousands of years more experience in space warfare. Tomorrow we show the galaxy something they have never seen before, Jake told his team. The USS Defiance approached the space station through a field of monitoring satellites that would record every moment of the trial. Amy Chun guided the ship with practiced precision, while the rest of the crew made final preparations for what most of the galaxy expected to be a very short engagement. The observer vessels maintained their positions at safe distances, their sensors focused on the human ship that looked impossibly small compared to the massive defensive challenge ahead. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, reviewing the tactical display one final time. The space station, designated Defense Platform Alpha, stretched across 2 kilometers of metal and composite materials with multiple levels of docking bays, communication arrays, and defensive positions. According to the trial rules, the station would be considered lost if its central power core suffered critical damage or if attacking forces maintained control of the command center for more than 10 minutes. All systems show green across the board, Rick Thompson reported from his engineering station. The young engineer had spent the transit time making minor modifications to their weapons and propulsion systems that might provide advantages in the upcoming engagement. Nothing dramatic or revolutionary, just small improvements that could make the difference between success and failure when margins were already impossibly thin. Lisa Martinez checked her weapons console, confirming ammunition counts and targeting parameters. The Defiance carried a limited supply of kinetic projectiles, along with a small number of guided missiles that would have to be used sparingly. Unlike the energy weapons employed by most galactic species, human armaments could not be recharged from the ship's power systems, and every shot depleted their finite resources. Sam Rodriguez monitored communication channels and sensor readings while coordinating with the Council's automated trial systems. The engagement would begin when the first wave of attack drones emerged from hyperspace at predetermined coordinates surrounding the space station. Historical data indicated that most species immediately moved to intercept these initial forces. Using standard fleet formation tactics, High Commander Vexstar observed from his crystalline command ship positioned 12 million kilometers away from the testing site. The Zephyrian warrior had witnessed dozens of these trials over his long career and expected the human attempt to follow familiar patterns before ending in predictable failure. His tactical staff had calculated that the Defiance would be destroyed within the first 6 minutes of engagement. The countdown reached 0 in space. Around Defense Platform Alpha erupted with the arrival of 36 fighter-type drones that materialized from hyperspace, jumps with perfect precision. Each unit measured 50 meters in length and carried weapons capable of penetrating standard military armor, along with propulsion systems that allowed speeds approaching 10% of light velocity. Most species met this first wave with multiple ships forming defensive formations around the space station. Amy Chun Amy-chan immediately executed a maneuver that surprised every observer watching the engagement. Instead of moving to intercept the attacking drones or establishing a defensive perimeter around the station, she guided the Defiance directly toward the massive structure's superstructure. The ship disappeared between the station's docking arms and support girders, using the complex architecture as cover from incoming fire. "What are they doing?" Vexstar demanded of his tactical officers. "No species has ever attempted to use the station structure for protection. The drones are designed to adapt to defensive positioning. The Zephyrian analysis was correct but incomplete." The attack drones had been programmed to counter conventional military tactics, but their adaptive algorithms were based on thousands of years of galactic warfare doctrine. None of the contributing civilizations had ever considered using the defended structure itself as a tactical advantage because their advanced technologies made such maneuvers unnecessary. Jake coordinated his crew's actions from the captain's chair while Amy threaded the Defiance through gaps between station components that seemed barely large enough for the ship to pass through. "Lisa, I want you to target drone propulsion systems rather than attempting to destroy them completely. Sam, monitor their formation patterns and look for opportunities to force them into disadvantageous positions." The first group of attack drones attempted to pursue the Defiance through the station's superstructure, but their larger size and less precise maneuvering capabilities put them at a serious disadvantage. Amy used her experience flying through asteroid fields to navigate spaces that the automated opponents could not safely enter. When drones tried to follow, they often collided with station components or became trapped in structural elements. Rick diverted power from non-essential systems to boost the ship's engines and maneuvering thrusters, giving Amy additional performance that the attacking forces had not anticipated. The modifications he had made during transit allowed the Defiance to operate at higher efficiency levels than its original specifications suggested. These improvements were minor by galactic standards, but provided crucial advantages when combined with unconventional tactics. Lisa began targeting individual drones with carefully aimed shots that disabled their propulsion systems rather than attempting to destroy them outright. This approach conserved ammunition while creating additional hazards for other attacking units that had to navigate around disabled opponents. The kinetic projectiles used by human weapons proved effective against drone armor that was designed to deflect energy-based attacks. Sam identified patterns in the drone formation, algorithms that suggested they were programmed to maintain minimum safe distances from each other to prevent collisions. He relayed this information to Amy, who began using the station structure to force attacking units into positions where their own safety protocols worked against them. Drones that should have been able to coordinate their attacks found themselves unable to achieve optimal positioning. The galactic observers watched in growing amazement as the first wave of attack drones suffered casualties without inflicting any damage on the defending human ship. The Defiance continued moving through the station's superstructure like a small predator using terrain to its advantage against larger opponents. This was not the type of engagement they had expected to witness. Ambassador Kethvar of the Centauri Hegemony studied the tactical displays from his observer position with professional interest. "Their movements are completely unpredictable by our standard analysis methods. How can combat effectiveness be calculated when the participants refuse to follow established protocols?" Ethereal Prime watched the engagement from the primary monitoring station with what might have been curiosity. This ancient being had observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, but had never seen a species approach the trial with such unconventional methods. The human tactics seemed almost primitive, yet they were proving remarkably effective against opponents designed to defeat advanced military forces. Amy executed another impossible maneuver that brought the Defiance out from behind a communication array directly beneath a group of pursuing drones. Lisa fired a concentrated burst that disabled 3 units simultaneously, while Amy immediately dove back into the station's structure before return fire could reach their position. The engagement was beginning to resemble a deadly game of 3-dimensional hide and seek rather than a conventional space battle. The second wave arrived ahead of schedule as the trial's adaptive systems responded to the unexpected effectiveness of the human defense. 18 larger drones materialized around the station, carrying heavier weapons and more sophisticated sensor systems designed to counter stealth and evasion tactics. Most species found this escalation overwhelming, especially when combined with survivors from the first wave. Jake anticipated this development and had positioned the Defiance near the station's main docking bay, where the ship could access additional resources if necessary. Rick, I need you to prepare our electronic warfare systems. Sam, start monitoring their communication frequencies and look for ways to disrupt their coordination. The arrival of the second wave should have ended the human trial according to every military expert observing the engagement. The combination of first and second wave forces had defeated multiple species who possessed far superior technology and firepower. Instead, the observers witnessed something unprecedented as the humans continued adapting their tactics to meet the increased threat. Amy began using the larger drone's superior firepower against their smaller companions by maneuvering in ways that caused friendly fire incidents among the attacking forces. The automated systems were programmed to avoid damaging each other, but their coordination algorithms struggled to account for a defending force that moved in completely unpredictable patterns. Rick activated improvised electronic warfare capabilities that he had jury-rigged from the ship's communication and sensor systems. The effects were subtle, but measurable, as attack drones began experiencing minor navigation errors and targeting difficulties. These disruptions were not enough to disable the automated opponents, but they created opportunities for more effective evasive maneuvering. Lisa continued her precision targeting approach while adapting to the increased number of threats. The third wave materialized around Defense Platform Alpha with perfect timing that should have coordinated with the surviving forces from previous attacks to create an overwhelming assault. 24 heavy assault drones emerged from hyperspace, carrying weapon systems capable of destroying capital ships and armor that could withstand direct hits from most galactic military forces. Combined with the remaining units from earlier waves, the human defenders now faced odds that had crushed civilizations with centuries more combat experience. Jake Morrison studied a tactical display while his crew continued their unconventional defense of the space station. The engagement had lasted over 3 hours, which was already longer than most galactic military experts had predicted for the entire trial. More importantly, the Defiance remained undamaged while the attacking forces had suffered significant casualties despite their overwhelming technological advantages. Amy, I need you to take us to the station's outer perimeter, Jake ordered while reviewing the positioning of the newest threats. We're going to try something that conventional military thinking would consider insane. Amy. Chun guided the ship away from the protective cover of the station's superstructure for the first time since the engagement began. The move drew immediate attention from every attack drone in the area as their targeting systems locked onto the human vessel that had been frustrating their efforts for hours. Multiple weapons fired simultaneously, creating a deadly crossfire that should have vaporized the small Earth ship. Instead of fleeing or seeking cover, Amy executed a complex spiral maneuver that used the Defiance's superior agility to stay ahead of incoming fire while moving toward the largest concentration of enemy forces. The ship appeared to be conducting a suicidal attack run against opponents that possessed overwhelming firepower advantages, but Jake's strategy was based on psychological principles that no galactic military doctrine had ever considered. Lisa, I want you to target their sensor arrays exclusively, Jake commanded while monitoring the response patterns of the attacking drones. make them think we're more damaged than we actually are. Sam start broadcasting false telemetry that suggests our engines are failing. The human crew began implementing what Earth military history would recognize as a classic deception operation, designed to make their opponents overconfident. The Defiance appeared to be conducting desperate attacks while suffering progressive system failures that reduced its combat effectiveness. The deception was subtle enough to fool automated systems that analyzed threats based on observable capabilities. Rather than potential tactics, Rick Thompson diverted power away from non-essential systems while creating false energy signatures that mimicked battle damage. The modifications he had made during transit allowed these deceptions to appear convincing to sensors designed to evaluate conventional spacecraft operations. To outside observers, the human ship seemed to be operating on emergency power with multiple systems failing under combat stress. The attack drones responded exactly as Jake had hoped, by becoming more aggressive in their pursuit of what appeared to be a crippled opponent. Their formation discipline relaxed as individual units moved to exploit the perceived weakness of the defending ship. This aggressive response created opportunities that had not existed when the automated forces maintained proper tactical coordination. Lisa Martinez fired carefully aimed shots that destroyed sensor equipment, while leaving weapon systems intact, creating the impression that the Defiance was struggling to achieve effective targeting. The kinetic projectiles punched through drone armor with satisfying impact while conserving ammunition for the critical phases of engagement that Jake anticipated would come later. Amy led the pursuing forces on a complex chase through the outer regions of the testing area where the space station structure could not provide cover or tactical advantages. The maneuver appeared to be the desperate flight of a damaged ship, but was actually positioning the attack drones for a carefully planned counteroffensive that would exploit their overconfidence. Sam Rodriguez monitored communication frequencies used by the automated opponents while transmitting false distress signals that reinforced the impression of human desperation. His electronic warfare efforts had evolved beyond simple jamming to include sophisticated psychological operations that manipulated enemy responses through carefully crafted misinformation. The galactic observers watched this phase of the engagement with growing confusion as the human tactics defied every principle of conventional military strategy. High Commander Vextar consulted with his tactical staff, trying to understand why the defenders were abandoning the advantages they had gained through their earlier unconventional approach. Perhaps their primitive technology is finally failing under the stress of prolonged combat, suggested one of the Zephyrian analysts. Their initial success may have been based on temporary advantages that could not be sustained. Against superior opposition, the ethereal Prime observed the engagement from a perspective informed by thousands of years of experience with different species and their approaches to warfare. This ancient being recognized patterns in the human behavior that suggested sophisticated planning rather than desperate improvisation, but remained uncertain about the ultimate objectives of their current tactics. Ambassador Keffer studied the tactical displays while discussing the engagement with military representatives from other Council species. If this is deception, it represents a level of psychological sophistication that our combat algorithms were not designed to counter. Most species rely on technological advantages rather than attempting to manipulate enemy decision-making processes. The fourth wave arrived precisely on schedule, adding 36 medium assault drones to the engagement, along with electronic warfare units designed to disrupt enemy communications and sensor systems. The combined forces now surrounding Defense Platform Alpha represented a threat level that had required full battle fleets to counter in previous trials. The human defenders faced over 90 active opponents with weapons and defensive systems, far superior to anything Earth had developed. Jake waited until the new arrivals had integrated with existing forces before implementing the next phase of his strategy. The Defiance had spent the past hour positioning itself in an optimal location while appearing to conduct a fighting retreat against overwhelming odds. Now the accumulated tactical advantages of their deception could be exploited in ways that conventional military thinking would never anticipate. "Amy, bring us around to attack Vector 7, Jake ordered while studying the positioning of enemy forces. "Lisa, I want concentrated fire on the command coordination units. Rick, prepare for maximum power transfer to weapons and engines simultaneously." Defiance suddenly reversed course and accelerated directly toward the largest concentration of attack drones while Amy executed maneuvers that demonstrated the ship's true capabilities for the first time during the engagement. The pursuing forces found themselves facing opponents who were neither damaged nor desperate, but had been conducting an elaborate tactical deception for over an hour. Lisa targeted the specialized command drones that coordinated attacks between different waves, while Rick diverted power from systems that had been deliberately suppressed to create false damage signatures. The weapons fire that erupted from the human ship was more accurate and effective than anything the automated opponents had encountered during their pursuit of what they believed was a crippled vessel. Sam activated jamming systems that disrupted coordination between drone groups while broadcasting targeting data that helped Lisa achieve optimal firing solutions against priority threats. The electronic warfare capabilities that had been used subtly throughout the engagement suddenly became decisive factors that degraded enemy effectiveness across multiple operational areas. The attack drones attempted to respond to this unexpected escalation, but their tactical algorithms were based on assumptions about human capabilities that had been systematically undermined through hours of careful deception. Units that had been positioned to exploit apparent weaknesses found themselves vulnerable to attacks from directions they had not anticipated. Amy used the confusion created by the sudden tactical reversal to position the Defiance for attacks against drone formations that had lost their coordination advantages. The ship that had appeared barely functional moments earlier demonstrated maneuverability that exceeded the capabilities of most galactic military vessels while maintaining accurate fire against multiple targets simultaneously. The engagement entered a critical phase as the automated forces attempted to adapt to the revelation that their opponents possessed capabilities far beyond what initial assessments had suggested. The trial's adaptive systems began implementing countermeasures designed to neutralize the advantages gained through deception, but these responses required time that the human defenders were not prepared to provide. Rick began preparing the ship's systems for what Jake anticipated would be the final and most dangerous phase of the trial. The modifications he had made during transit were designed to support exactly this type of sustained, high-intensity combat where every system would be pushed beyond normal operational limits. The fifth and final wave emerged from hyperspace with a precision that demonstrated the trial's ultimate challenge. A massive command drone materialized at the center of the testing area, accompanied by 12 elite Guardian units that represented the pinnacle of galactic military technology. The command vessel measured over 800 meters in length and carried weapon systems equivalent to those found on Council dreadnoughts, along with adaptive artificial intelligence that incorporated tactical knowledge from 47 different civilizations. Jake Morrison studied the new arrivals, while his crew continued their engagement with the surviving forces from previous waves. A USS Defiance had already achieved something unprecedented by lasting over 4 hours against opponents designed to overwhelm applicant species within minutes. More significantly, they had demonstrated tactical approaches that challenged fundamental assumptions about military effectiveness and the relationship between technology and combat capability. The command drone immediately began coordinating the scattered attack forces with efficiency that transformed the chaotic engagement into a precisely orchestrated assault. Individual drones that had been operating independently suddenly formed cohesive formations, while damaged units withdrew to support roles that maximized their remaining capabilities. The artificial intelligence governing this coordination represented thousands of years of military evolution. This is what destroyed the Regellian Federation, Amy Chun observed while maneuvering to avoid the concentrated fire that was now being directed at their position. 12 heavy cruisers couldn't generate enough firepower to penetrate that thing's defenses before it systematically eliminated them. Rick Thompson monitored the power signatures emanating from the command drone while analyzing its defensive systems. The massive vessel possessed energy shields that could absorb direct hits from capital ship weapons, along with armor composed of exotic materials that could self-repair moderate damage. Most troubling was the adaptive nature of its defenses, which learned from each attack and adjusted to counter similar threats more effectively. Lisa Martinez calculated firing solutions against the command drone while recognizing that conventional weapons approaches would prove futile against such overwhelming defensive advantages. The kinetic projectiles that had served them well against smaller opponents would have minimal effect against shields and armor designed to withstand the most powerful weapons in galactic arsenals. Sam Rodriguez intercepted communications between the command drone and its subordinate units while attempting to identify weaknesses in their coordination protocols. The artificial intelligence directing the assault was far more sophisticated than anything they had faced during earlier phases of the trial, but it still operated according to logical principles that might be exploitable through unconventional approaches. The galactic observers watched this final phase with intense interest as the human defenders faced odds that had defeated every previous species to attempt the trial. High Commander Vextar studied tactical displays that showed the command drone systematically eliminating defensive positions around the space station while coordinating attacks that should overwhelm any remaining resistance. No species has ever survived contact with the final wave commander, reported one of the Zephyrian tactical analysts. The adaptive artificial intelligence learns from every previous engagement and incorporates countermeasures specifically designed to defeat any tactics that proved effective during earlier phases. The ethereal prime observed the engagement with the perspective of an ancient being who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The humans had already demonstrated capabilities that challenged established assumptions about military effectiveness, but the final test represented a level of challenge that had broken species with far superior technology and resources. Jake reviewed the tactical situation while considering options that conventional military doctrine would never contemplate. The command drone was indeed formidable with defensive and offensive capabilities that made direct confrontation impossible for a single ship with limited resources. However, the trial rules only required defending the space station until all attacking forces were eliminated and did not specify the methods that could be used to achieve that objective. Amy, I need you to plot a course directly toward the command drone, Jake ordered while studying the massive vessel's power distribution patterns. Lisa, prepare our remaining missiles for simultaneous launch. Rick, I want maximum power to engines and structural integrity systems. The crew responded to these orders with practiced efficiency, despite recognizing that Jake was planning something that appeared suicidal by any rational analysis. The Defiance was no match for the command drone in direct combat and attempting to engage. Such a powerful opponent would normally result in immediate destruction. Amy plotted the requested course, while calculating the precise timing that would be required for whatever plan Jake had developed. The approach vector would take them directly through the defensive fire of the Guardian units and into range of the command drone's primary weapon systems, where they could be vaporized by a single, concentrated salvo. Lisa programmed the remaining missiles for a coordinated launch that would occur simultaneously with their arrival at optimal range. The weapons represented their last significant offensive capability and using them in a single volley would leave the Defiance defenseless against any counterattack that followed. Rick diverted power from every non-essential system while reinforcing the ship's structural integrity fields to maximum possible levels. The modifications created stress patterns throughout the hull that pushed their vessel beyond safe operational limits, but provided the performance characteristics that Jake's plan required. Sam established communication links with the space stations, automated systems while preparing to coordinate with station defenses if the opportunity arose. The defensive platforms had remained inactive throughout the engagement, but their systems could potentially be activated if someone gained access to the proper control protocols. The Defiance accelerated toward the command drone while Guardian units attempted to intercept their approach with devastating volleys of weapons fire. Amy's piloting skills allowed them to avoid the worst of the incoming attacks, but the ship sustained moderate damage that reduced their operational capabilities and confirmed the observers' expectations of imminent destruction. Jake waited until they reached optimal range before implementing a plan that defied every principle of space combat that galactic civilizations had developed over millennia of warfare. Instead of engaging the command drone with their weapons, he ordered Amy to ram the massive vessel at maximum velocity while the crew evacuated to the space station using emergency escape pods. The collision between the small human ship and the enormous command drone should have resulted in minimal damage to the larger vessel while completely destroying the Defiance. Instead, Jake had identified a critical vulnerability in the command drone's power distribution system that could be exploited through a precisely calculated impact at a specific location on its hull. Rick had analyzed the power signatures and identified a cascade failure point where the command drone's primary reactor connected to its defensive systems through a relatively fragile junction that was protected by standard armor rather than the exotic materials used elsewhere. A kinetic impact at that exact location would disrupt power flow in ways that the vessel's designers had never anticipated. The ramming attack triggered exactly the chain reaction that Jake had calculated with the command drone's power systems, suffering catastrophic failure that disabled its weapons, shields, and propulsion simultaneously. The massive vessel became a drifting hulk, while its Guardian units lost coordination and became vulnerable to the station's suddenly activated defensive systems. Sam had used their final approach to establish command links with defense platform Alpha, allowing him to activate automated defenses that eliminated the remaining attack drones while the human crew recovered from their emergency evacuation. The trial ended with all attacking forces destroyed and the space station intact despite damage from the prolonged engagement. The galactic observers sat in stunned silence as they processed what they had witnessed during the 6-hour engagement. The humans had not only survived the trial, but completed it without losing a single crew member, while demonstrating tactical capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about military effectiveness and strategic thinking. High Commander. Vextar rose slowly from his command chair and spoke the question that echoed through the observer fleet. "So this is a human force," he said with newfound respect evident in his voice. "They achieved victory, not through superior technology or overwhelming firepower, but through adaptability, creativity, and the willingness to sacrifice their ship to protect their objective." The ethereal prime's energy field pulsed with what ancient beings might express as amazement. The trial had been designed to test military capability, but the humans had demonstrated something far more valuable than conventional combat effectiveness. They had shown the galaxy what could be accomplished when intelligence was applied to problems that others considered impossible to solve.